Hello and welcome back to EASD TV. We're going to be talking fat. Now there's a very intriguing title and I was on it immediately. Thermogenic activation, the Holy Grail. So we are talking fat and we have two people who are at the symposium today, Kirsi Virtanen from Finland and Christian Wolfrum from Switzerland. So welcome to you both. And what kind of fat are we talking about? And tell me about the Holy Grail.
So we're discussing brown fat, or we have been discussing brown fat, which is we have two types of fat in the body. One, the white that everybody knows that you store the energy in, and then the brown fat, which is considered catabolic, so it burns energy. Quite the opposite. It's considered to burn energy because to produce heat, to protect the body from cold, as an alternative to shivering.
So this sounds good. So what do we do to activate our brown fat, Kirsi?
The most potent physiological activator is cold. So if you've spent some time in outdoors, it doesn't need to be extreme. Less than 20 degrees already activates your brown fat. So cold is very potent activator.
So it's not a question of doing the Finnish thing and jumping from a sauna into an ice, through an ice hole. It can even be at relatively low temperatures.
It can be, yes. But of course, we have studied a number of ice swimmers and they do have active brown fat. So of course that stimulates as well. Maybe even better, but in daily life you don't need to jump into ice cold water.
So keeping your thermostat at 19 degrees or lower is not just going to irritate Mr. Putin, it's also going to activate your brown fat.
Exactly. That's one thing that I've been hoping that will be raised up, that lowering the temperature, you save your electricity, but at the same time you enhance your health.
Is this widely known and what's the evidence behind it?
So the evidence comes from studies conducted, for example, by Kirsi and others who have looked at patients or people, and they exposed them to cold and then checked the activity of brown fat. I want to add to this what you're saying, right? There is some old correlation studies with temperature and obesity, right? We always discuss sedentary lifestyle, glucose availability, but there's also a nice correlation between the in-house temperature and the degree of obesity. So that if that is a reason for the increase in obesity, we don't know, but we're definitely heating our homes more than we did, let's say, 50 years ago.
Yes, we tend to wear a lot of pullovers. I mean, my mother's generation, she would just put on extra pullovers. But now we tend to want to walk around in T-shirts all the time inside. And do you seriously think that that has had an impact on the incidence of diabetes?
There are, of course, other factors as well, like our nutrition and sedentary lifestyle. So we cannot say that it's the one factor that is affecting. They are all together.
But it's certainly at play. One of the things
I think so,
that's
yes.
involved.
Yeah.
Now, where does this knowledge take us for the ordinary, if I can ever call any of you ordinary, diabetologist? In terms of, what does this mean to the clinician looking after them?
Yeah. So from cross-sectional studies, we have found that those persons who have active brown fat, they have better glycaemic control, they have better lipid profile in their bloodstream. But also persons with obesity, if they have active brown fat, they benefit even more. They have less type 2 diabetes than those persons who don't have active brown fat.
Now, is the distribution of brown fat, is that something that is genetically determined, or can the amount of brown fat that you have be altered in some way?
It can be altered by cold acclimation, by exposing yourself regularly to cold. So that's shown already in human studies.
there is a bit of evidence that there's some genetics involved. So not everybody probably has the same propensity to be able to activate. But all the studies that carefully performed cold acclimatization of patients were able to induce the brown fat in more or less everybody. But some will probably activate brown fat better than others. And there might be a genetic component in there that we don't understand yet. The problem is, to do genetics, you need larger numbers. Brown fat at the moment, to quantify brown fat, you need imaging technologies, and that preclude these huge numbers that you would need to actually do meaningful genetics on people.
Now, can I ask a really stupid question? And my really stupid question is, what about people who live in hot countries?
There's not so much data on hot countries, rather on cold countries, if I remember correctly. There's quite a bit of data on people in cold countries that have more brown fat. But I'm not sure if people actually, I'm not aware of studies checking really the differences between hot versus less hot countries. But we would expect that there's less brown fat in these people.
There are some studies from Australia, from Brazil, from Singapore, which show that the activity of human brown fat is not that high than in the colder climates.
The problem is there we might run into the genotype issue again, because there's some discussions that in the Asian population in generally there's less brown fat, but we don't know it's the environment or it's the genetic genotype in this case.
I seem to remember from my physiology, which is a very long time ago to be fair, that babies have quite a lot of brown fat.
Yes, that's very true, and the function is obvious. Once they don't have muscles to produce heat yet, they need some mechanism to prevent from cooling or keeping them warm. But the situation or the location of brown fat is changing a bit when we come to adolescence and adulthood. So babies have the brown fat depot in their back. Upper back, while adult humans, the brown fat is more distributed throughout the body, but the largest depots are found from the neck area.
And I wonder why that is. Is that because it's exposed to cold, potentially?
I don't think this is ultimately proven yet. There's some discussions that this heating activity might be there, especially the brown fat close to the spine, to heat, to ensure a temperature control close to the nerves. But nobody has conclusively proven this. It's clear that the brown fat is most prominent in the upper body region, but people with a lot of brown fat, you can find it also quite far down in the body, even down to the abdominal region.
Now, provocatively, this session was called the Holy Grail. Why might brown fat be the Holy Grail, Christian?
The point behind it is that, similar to exercise, active brown fat would generate a constant metabolic flux that we know is very beneficial for diabetes. I would be careful with the obesity, but we know that constant exercise, increasing your metabolic flux, will help in preventing diabetes, maybe even in treating, because we know lifestyle interventions work quite well. And the idea is obviously that you could activate a tissue that does the same thing and thereby enhance your metabolic flux and ultimately protect yourself from diabetes or even decrease the burden of diabetic or pre-diabetic phenotype.
So is it a Holy Grail, Kirsi?
The animal studies show that active brown fat is capable of kind of catching up the lipids from the bloodstream, so kind of clearing the bloodstream from lipids and glucose. So therefore it might be...
If we could find a way to activate brown fat without necessarily jumping into an ice bath, then that would be good news. How can we do that? Is it possible even?
Oh, I think so. And this is what a lot of work has been geared towards, right? What can activate brown fat besides the general pathways that get activated in response to cold? The problem is that these pathways in general also lead to higher cardiac output, higher heart rate, and this is obviously a problem in people that have a risk of cardiovascular disease. So I think we have to understand brown fat a little bit better to devise sensible strategies. But I agree with Kirsi, right? The cross-sectional studies on association with the amount of brown fat and metabolic control are exceptional, right? There was not so long ago a paper from a New York group, and the people with brown fat, especially obesity, are really doing much better when it comes to lipids, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. But back to your question, we still have no pharmacological tools yet to activate it. I would say nothing that can yet be utilized.
So Kirsi, where is this research going? I mean, it's fascinating basic research, but what is it telling us for the future, and what's the research going towards?
Of course, there are a number of molecules which could be tested for pharmacological use as well, but the point is that it should be so selective, affecting only on brown fat and not having those side effects is, of course, the main question. But there is a number of questions that we don't know yet in humans. What is the role of brown adipose tissue in human metabolic control and function?
I don't know about a Holy Grail. It's a mystery. And there's definitely a quest here.
But one should note there was a question mark next to the Holy Grail in the session title, and I think that's well taken, because I think we need a proof of concept that it works, right? With an intervention besides cold, which also does other things, to show that that humans would benefit from activating brown fat. But I think so far we haven't seen anything negative, and I know that a lot of companies are working on aspects to induce it. So I hope we can see more of this in the future.
Well, thank you both. So that was an absolutely fascinating symposium, and the very good news is that you haven't missed it, because you can still catch up with it on the EASD web service. I think I will just have to turn the temperature down even more on my thermostat, and the very good news is that makes Mr. Putin very cross as well. Double whammy there. Bye for now.